I'm going to boil it down to a couple of concepts I think you can understand. One is the issue of pride. Related to that is this issue of respect. And also to boil down all the technical complexities. Sharon and I were talking yesterday. It occurred to me that it's really about the plutonium. So to kind of borrow the, remember that when Bill Clinton was running for president, it was economy stupid. Well, I'm going to modify that, and I'm going to say it's the plutonium smarty. So how can we get smart on keeping track of plutonium? That's what we need to really be concerned about. Plutonium and how much uranium India has and how much it's trying to get from outside supplies and how that could affect India's ability to make plutonium. Because what we're really worried about here is proliferation of weapons usable stuff, mainly plutonium. That's the Indian program. So first, I also need to tell you that this is really not an energy deal. It's been misrepresented as such, mainly in India. And all my interlocutors, people I talked to about a dozen colleagues in New Delhi and Mumbai, and from centrists and communists and conservatives. And they all pretty much agreed that Manmohan Singh pretty much misrepresented this deal from the get-go. Think back to July 2005 when he and President Bush inked this agreement. And there was especially a lot of euphoria in India. They felt that they finally got what they wanted. They've gotten respect from the United States of America, respect for what they accomplished with the nuclear program. And we got to really salute them for that, because they have been under some pretty serious restrictions for more than 30 years, and they've created an indigenous program, and it has achieved some successes. It hasn't ever met, though, its projected goals for nuclear energy production. So you got to keep that in mind, especially when you hear about the projections under the nuclear deal. So why was there so much euphoria back then? Because it looked like the U.S. was basically going to treat India pretty much as an equal nuclear armed state. Administration couldn't bestow nuclear weapons state status on India because under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, only 5 countries met that requirement. They tested a nuclear device prior to January 1st, 1967. They got under the wire. India didn't test a device until 1974. So what is India? It's kind of neither fish nor fowl. But under the treaty, it's considered a non-nuclear weapon state. So there's been this tension about how do we deal with the Indian civilian nuclear program when it's so intertwined with the strategic nuclear program. And under the Nuclear Suppliers Group's rules, and I know Daryl's going to talk a lot about the NSG, so I won't say much about it, but under the NSG, it's not really rules, guidelines, they established, when they revised the guidelines in 1992, that only countries that have all of their civilian nuclear programs under full scope safeguards are eligible to receive supplies from the NSG countries. Now, India only has very few of its reactors currently under safeguards, what's called Information Circular 66 facility-specific safeguards agreement. And what they are planning, as Sharon was talking about, is to put some more of their reactors under what they're calling India-specific safeguards. It's still pretty fuzzy about what that really means. But when you look at what's left out, you need to ask yourself, so how much plutonium could they make? They can still make a lot more plutonium that would be outside of safeguards. Now, are they going to use that plutonium to make nuclear weapons? Probably not. But to be honest, we don't know. And everyone I talk to in India really doesn't know. And what's interesting is since they tested almost 10 years ago, May 1998, they've been kind of wishy-washy about their strategic development. They haven't really, they've done some thinking. They haven't really made some hard decisions about how much reserve plutonium they need and how many weapons they need. So that's why they want maximum flexibility under this deal. They want to keep as much of the program outside safeguards as possible. And they want to keep all their breeder program outside of safeguards. Breeder program can make lots of plutonium. That's going to be the proposed second phase of their development. Decades ago, Dr. Homi Bhabha, the great Indian nuclear scientist, laid out a 3-stage program for India. And the second stage is plutonium breeders, and the third stage uses thorium. But that probably won't take place until mid-century. We're a long way off from that. So how are they going to get from basically this first stage program now, where they are using some limited indigenous uranium boost up to this plutonium program? Well, they projected, based on indigenous uranium reserves that they know of, they could support about 10,000 megawatts of nuclear generated electricity. So 10,000 megawatts of electricity, what's that? What am I talking about here? Well, okay, Washington, D.C., about 500,000 people and living on an American lifestyle, so we love our electricity. You need about 1,000 megawatt, a large nuclear reactor, basically supply Washington, D.C.'s electricity needs. So if you had 10,000 megawatts of reactors, you could fuel the electricity needs of 10 Washington, D.C.'s. That would give you some sense of the extent of what India could do just with its own uranium supplies. Okay, India, 1.1 billion people. Most of them don't have access to electricity, but even those who do, we're not talking about supplying a huge portion of their electricity supplies. They're only supplying about 2% of their electricity needs from nuclear right now. They have less than 4,000 megawatts, just under 4,000 megawatts of nuclear electricity. Under the nuclear deal, they're saying, hey, if you carve an exception for us in the NSG and through Congress, what we could propose is to bring in foreign suppliers to help reach this goal of 20,000 megawatts of nuclear electricity by the year 2020. So 20,000 by 2020. So is that reachable? Well, I've talked to the top energy planner in New Delhi, who's in the Planning Commission. He's worked in Washington, D.C. for some 20 years at the International Finance Corporation. Very smart man. He said he was basically coerced to put those numbers in the planning document a year and a half ago. And he was trying to qualify those very ambitious projections by saying that even if they reach the 20,000 megawatt level by 2020, that will only be 5% of our electricity needs based on projected demand. So even if this deal fully goes through and we're able to supply a few more reactors to India, it's not going to make a huge difference in terms of electricity supplies. So I think we could have crafted a real energy deal with India that will look at the entire energy sector, look at efficiencies and conservation, but you can talk to me more about that in Q&A. Just see, look at my notes, see one of the things I wanted to emphasize before turning to Daryl. So what are the Indian views now? So since the 123 was published in August of last year, we've seen a turning of the tide from some initial support. The nuclear scientists who loved the July 2005 agreement because it seemed to be treating India as an equal, now are at best ambivalent toward the 123 or downright hostile to it. Because what they see the 123 is doing, and it's open to interpretation. As Sharon was saying, it's kind of ambiguous. It's a very complicated document. You've got to read it very closely. You need a team of lawyers to really go at it. But the Indian perspective I talked to from nuclear scientists is that it's now treating India like a second-class citizen, and they hate that. Because it looks like it's putting kind of some restrictions on India, and they especially don't like the Hyde Act. The Hyde Act is, they really don't like the Hyde Act because that puts lots of restrictions on India from their perspective. And the 123 looks like it's trying to water down parts of the Hyde Act in their perspective, but it still leaves things open to interpretation. So they're very unsure of where they stand right now. They would love to be treated like France or Britain, to have voluntary safeguards arrangements, to basically do whatever they want with the program. But then others I talked to who I think have more of a pragmatic sense that, look, we can live with specific safeguards, permanent safeguards on proposed facilities, because it really doesn't cramp our program that much. And we still would have a significant reserve capacity to make plutonium. So it's still pretty much up in the air in New Delhi in terms of the scientific support. You have at least a couple different camps there. And on the leftist side of the equation, you have the leftists taking out a position, it looks like a very ideological position. They hate this deal because it looks like it will put New Delhi in the hip pocket of Uncle Sam. I had lunch a few weeks ago, just before I left New Delhi, with a Marxist colleague, and he co-authored a book called Uncle Sam's Nuclear Cabinet. So I think that says it all. The title of that book, you don't have to, I've been reading the book, it's an interesting book, but you don't have to read the book. Just memorize the title and you know what the leftist position is on this.